So I am going to call the meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting up for Thursday, October 15th to order at 7:39. I would like those present to identify the members and alternates first, and then other people can identify themselves, and then we will move on to approval of the minutes. So Nanette Falkenberg, Chair.
Margaret Minor, member.
Douglas Lewis, member.
Sue?
I'm an alternate.
Alternates and members.
Oh, okay. You want to listen? Okay. Sue Scott, alternate.
Nancy Holtz, alternate.
Stephen Meyer, alternate.
Margaret?
I said Margaret Minor, member.
Okay, thank you. Now,
Karen Copta.
Oh, Karen Copta, member.
okay. Any members of the public?
That is correct, John Cody.
Okay, so it's my pleasure to welcome Steve Meyer as an alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Welcome, Steve. Do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Steve Meyer. I live up on Squire Road. I've semi-retired from being a lawyer and love the community. So I was very happy to undertake this work.
And we're glad to have you. Someday we'll all meet in person. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of June 18th, 2020.
So move.
Margaret moves. Second?
I second.
Who was I? Nancy?
Yeah.
Discussion. Thank you. Discussion? Thank you, Julie. No discussion. Okay, before I call for the vote, I need to seat somebody to replace Bill. And Nancy, I think we moved you up last time, according to the minutes. So I'm going to move Doug up. We won't move Steve up on his first meeting. We'll let him get to know us a little bit.
Doug's not an alternate.
I think I'm already up.
See, Doug is permanently up.
Yeah, he's a member.
Okay, so I'm going to move Doug up for.
No, Doug is a member. He's not an alternate anymore.
Oh my God, you are right. Okay, Sue, do you want to be moved up?
Yeah, I think it's my turn.
Yeah, I think it
Sure.
is. Sorry, Doug, I forgot.
That's okay.
Okay, I'm going to move Sue Scott up in Bill Davies' seat. And now I will call for a vote on the approval of the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we move on to continuing the topic of conversation we began last month, which is reviewing our ZBA procedures with keeping the Verillo decision in mind and trying to figure out if there's any way for us to have more leeway in the decisions that we make. I just want to remind everybody that we are being taped. Always taped, but the tape doesn't always go up on the internet. So that's part of the procedures now, and I just want to remind people. Last time we had somewhat of a casual conversation, and I think given that we are being taped, I think we should just keep it a little more formal. Let me just say that. Open the meeting up for discussion. Okay.
Well, so what we were looking at, Julie sent ZBA minutes from other towns. That's part of what we're looking at.
Yeah.
And I actually sat in on a ZBA meeting, Zoom in Monroe, where the pattern seemed to be the same as the best I could see in the proceedings that Julie came up with. In other words, the variance in question in Monroe was rather similar to the one we discussed in our last application, and they granted it with all kinds of provisions that we would have, all kinds of comments that we would have thought were, and I'm sure in fact were, not legally proper. For instance, they said that it's a hardship to have a non-conformity. So, and this was a stairway going upstairs, and they, so they did not seem to feel, I don't think they'd even heard of, there was no discussion of any problems with what would seem to us perhaps to be an old-fashioned approach to the consideration.
So Julie, you found that about a third of the ones you looked at didn't have enough business to really look at much, and then the other 2/3?
Other 2/3 stuck to the letter of pretty much the decisions that you guys were advised on, where a hardship's only granted if it's with the land. Otherwise, there's no personal hardship, and the other ones had some element of judgment, and they would grant things very mildly, like very small. If they had to go into a setback, they may let you go 2 feet into it. So they didn't give big things, but they stated, a lot of them stated if it was a reasonable request.
But reasonable is the problem, right? The word
is the problem, because the way I was trained with you guys is it's the problem is that a hardship has to be determined, and it cannot be personal in nature. So,
well, I don't know if people had a chance. I'm assuming you didn't have a chance to read the Verillo decision in total, but I did send along an article that summarized the findings, and one of the things it says is the reasonableness is not grounds for granting it was on the list of things you can't grant a variance for.
I think you have
Steve?
hardship, and then you can measure the.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, reasonableness in and of itself is not a hardship. You would first have to find a hardship, and then you can measure the request. But to have somebody come before you and just make a, quote, reasonable request sort of bypasses the first step of determining whether there's a hardship or not. And Ned, I did read the Verillo decision again, and when you compare that language that's being issued by the appellate court, I think it was the appellate, maybe the Supreme Court, and you contrast that with the article that you attached, it really boils it down that hardships are few and far between, and they're difficult to prove. And when we try to bend over backwards to help somebody, we really put our board at risk for lawsuits and complaints and things of that nature.
Steve, did you want to jump in here?
No, but I read the material and I would agree with that. I mean, it was very clear from both the decision and also that memo, which was very thorough, that, there's a very limited scope in which one can grant relief from the statutes, from the zoning law.
I did want to mention that in the memo from 2016 that Julie found, it did seem to me that I wasn't confused if it appeared to me that there might be a exception for historic buildings. I don't know if you noticed that, Doug. And we do have some in Roxbury. I'll go back and take a look at that. I wondered if there was one case that Gail cited where it appeared, maybe on a quick reading, that the fact that it was a historic building, the ZBA could take into account.
Yes, I remember seeing that as well.
I think, I'm not sure if it's the same case, but I think somebody made the argument that, I don't know if the building was historical or just simply old, but the claim is that in order to bring it up to code, certain things, whether it was, increase a footprint or what the request was, but they sort of tied it to the fact that this is an old building. It was built, perhaps now under today's codes, it would be considered unsafe, and that's our hardship. And that, to me, is again tied more to the structure, not necessarily to the land.
Got it.
I sort of got the feeling that they were looking at the fact that if the variance would help keep the historic building, that they would be a little more lenient, as opposed to maybe tearing it down and building something within the footprint of the building.
Do you think that would have given us, so Steve, I should have summarized this, but you may have already gathered that what we're struggling with is the Verlo decision has left us in a position where it's very hard for the applicant to prove a hardship. And so we deal with these applications that one was a stairwell that required a dormer, an old barn, it required a dormer. So the exterior of the structure was being changed. And then that's the last one we dealt with. The one before, they were adding, they were enclosing a part of the front entrance. And, in both cases, this argument that comes up in Barillo, that it was such a small change, was made as part of the argument. And the Barillo case basically says the de minimis argument doesn't matter. But anyway, that's what we're struggling with, because people really are having a difficult time feeling like they're serving the community at this point, when we have to turn down things that strike even us as reasonable. So that's what we're struggling with. Nancy, you haven't said anything.
I'm a little depleted, but I'm listening tonight.
Okay. Karen?
I'm sorry, I'm looking at like a complete black screen and trying to.
But can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
And we can see you.
Well,
She can't see that.
So, yeah, so yes, well, I read over all the materials that Julie pulled together, and as well as what we had heard from Gail, dating back a few years ago. It's certainly a lot to take in. It looked to me as though some of our surrounding towns seem to give themselves a little more leeway to grant approvals. Also, as Julie pointed out, that some of the towns have been as strict as we have.
Oh,
I was a little
God.
confused when I was going through it, that it seems as though I'm not sure I guess in terms of the law, abiding by the law, I guess we're all on the same page. It seems like some towns have, what do they call it? Like ground coverage or land, different things that they take into consideration besides what we do. Is it called lot coverage? But yeah, I mean, I've had an emotional reaction to the last few meetings, that I just have been feeling as though, well, if we are unable to exercise any kind of judgment as it relates specifically to our community, and that that we're bound to I don't know, to stay so close to the letter of the law when it comes to a hardship, in that the only hardship that's acceptable is a topographical one. I just wonder what kind of service ultimately as a board we're doing to our community. So I'm happy we have an opportunity to discuss it. I'm very distressed that I can't see everybody while we are discussing it, but so it goes.
Okay, Sue?
And well, I ran out of paper as I was printing out all of the various cases. So needless to say, I didn't get any of this till today. So I'm a little behind, period. And I wasn't at the other meeting because that was when I was in the hospital. But I too felt that same kind of frustration, that I sort of thought our job when I joined was, because we would be dealing with things like small lot size or setbacks and things, and we would be allowed to use some discretion with that. That was, and it sounds like we're really being sort of herded into one thing and one thing only, that we can grant a variance for, which is basically as was already stated, the topography. And I know we have had one case since I've been on the board that involved that, but the other things have been more about setbacks and things like that, and the historical nature of places. And if we have to disregard those things, isn't that going to make it very hard for people in town who have older structures, or structures that were built long ago enough that they, didn't meet, that they didn't have requirements for where they were put?
I guess now that I've reread those materials, and it seems to me that if we choose to follow the rules as set out in Varillo, we are at the point that we're going to be, which is our hands are tied except for it is very, I'll use Doug's formulation. It is very difficult to give a hardship, to prove a hardship, and hardship should be found. There should be a relatively small number of hardships granted. I think we're feeling like we're not granting any, but I think that one of the things that struck me is we're doing a pretty good job in terms of the rationale and the stipulations of Varillo. So, Margaret, last time you spoke a little bit about doing some things that might change the law. And
I have that sort of two areas of recourse. We could ask zoning, since we're talking about zoning rules from which there'll be a variance, and zoning gave that 25% kind of leeway recently. So you could look at the zoning and see if there's something in zoning at the town, or as Gail mentioned to us, and I'm quite sure it's being, whether this is too strict and whether the statute and the case law is too strict and whether the statute should be changed is being discussed by the planning section of the Connecticut Bar and the environmental section of the Connecticut Bar. And I'm pretty sure, and Gail and others on the phone may know about it, that another recourse would be to take a look at the statute. So those were the two recourses that I could think of. And Gail did mention that she'd heard that in the Connecticut Bar, Varillo had made quite a stir. I don't know what's been going on with it this year.
So I was to call Gail, which I didn't, because Karen came up with this really great idea about looking at minutes from other towns, and I thought it was worth taking a look at that before we talk to Gail. But I am certainly willing to call Gail and see whether there's anything going on in the legislature. And John is here. John Cody is here. So, John, is there anything you want to add in terms of possibly something we could go to zoning with?
Yeah, certainly. If you want to propose a regulation and bring it to zoning, that's something I'm sure they would look at. Just like the 25% increase for the primary house. We had a lot of problems with those. We worked well together and we accomplished that. So now the primary house can have a 25% increase in its volume. We just changed the non-conforming use of barns. If a barn is, or we're going to be, I should say, if the barn straddles the setback, the portion of the barn that is on the outside of the setback, basically the conforming section, the use can be changed as opposed to just a storage for, hay, wagons, whatever farm implements they have. And since we're talking about, the barns, I need to touch base on one thing you did mention, that application that was turned down, that is not a barn. That is a pool house / studio. That's why he was given the application or the permit for the bathroom on the inside. But to go back to the regulation change, yeah, please, we would love to tackle that for you.
But what is it? Maybe somebody can give us some ideas of what regulations could we ask to be changed?
Yeah,
that would help us here.
I'm sorry, John Cody again. That would be diving right into the 3.10, primarily 310.4, non-conforming uses, stuff like that. The same thing we did for the houses. We'd have to massage that to a different direction.
Who is we?
The zoning commission, obviously.
Any thoughts on how we might ask, do we want to ask for a change, and what that change might be that would give us a little more flexibility.
John Cody again. Yeah, Nanette, no problem. If you guys would like to draft something, get your thoughts together, send that to me in email. I can bring it up at the next zoning commission meeting. And then they got to kick it around the can. It is a big deal. It's time consuming, but we got to start with baby steps. So put your ideas together, give it to us, and I'll give it to them, and they discuss that.
I think my question to the board is, well, what would that change if we wanted to make such a change? What might that be?
Excuse me, John, again. The one thing I'm sure, Steve, you'll probably agree with me on this one. Is it possible? I don't think it's possible. Now I'm thinking about this harder. The zoning regulation cannot supersede state statute, can it?
No.
Thank you. It just dawned me. We're chasing a good luck then. I'm sorry about that.
Because aren't we essentially talking as our board, as the ZBA, about some legal way of loosening the requirements for a hardship?
Steve, do you want that?
Well, I mean, if you could hone some specific things which might permit you to help some people, maybe you could work that into the zoning code. But again, I think you got to really be careful that you're not dragging then your zoning regulations against state regulations.
Yeah, basically the entire hardship clause you're trying to dismantle.
Right.
Doug, do you have any thoughts on potentially asking for a change in zoning regulations?
Well, the hardship clause, I mean, it's...
John, I'm asking Doug.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Do I have any suggestions on change?
Well, your thoughts on it as a potential strategy.
Well, it seems like we're taking the position that we have to do something, and I'm not so sure that that's our place.
Okay.
Some of these last applications, they had sort of two strikes against them, because not only were they coming in for variances, but they were pre-existing non-conforming structures, which, and the way the presentation is, the applicant comes in and they show you, the wonderful way that this structure is going to look after they're done. And we sort of push the hardship to the end. And you kind of get, to take Karen's point, you kind of get emotionally attached to this wonderful building that they're going to build. And then you have to try to find a way to give it to them. And I think the whole approach of an applicant or these applications should be reversed. We shouldn't be looking at the floor plan. We shouldn't be looking at the way the exterior elevations and so forth until and unless they first tell us how is their property affected by a hardship, and secondly, especially in these cases of pre-existing non-conforming structures, how is it possible for us to do anything given the constrictures, of 3.10? So I don't know that it's our place to tell the zoning commission to loosen its rules or regulations. Regardless of what the zoning commission does, there's always going to be somebody who says, I need more. And that's when they come to us. And it's our job under the statute to find a hardship and then look at what it is that they're proposing. So no, I don't have any suggestions for the commission.
Okay. So where I'm going to leave this part of the discussion is that I would encourage people to take another look at the zoning regs that govern that govern the ZBA, and if anybody has any ideas about how we might think about changing, asking the zoning commission to change the regs, to raise it again at a future meeting. I don't know what else to do with it at this point, particularly because of the concern about coming up against state statute.
But you are going to speak to Gail to see if there's anything cooking in Hartford?
Yes. Yes,
I
am.
I might add that when I said the two recourses that I mentioned, I know that at least once the net, I said, of course, I might oppose the result. I'm not sure how much, I'm not sure where I personally would, how I would feel about a change, but those were the two areas where I thought one could look for change if you wanted it. I go back to, we remember Lewis Hurlbut, Kathy Brunson's father on ZBA, saying, we need some small buildings in Roxbury. They're right for young couples. They're right for people starting out.
Margaret?
Yep.
We're losing you. So could you go back about 2 sentences?
I was saying that the areas of recourse I suggested, I also mentioned I might be in opposition to the results. Particularly, I was thinking of Lewis Hurlbut, Kathy Bronson's father, when he was head of the ZBA, bemoaning, on the other hand, so many variances, saying we need to keep our cottages, we need to keep our small buildings, we need to have a place where a young couple or a poor family can move and can afford to live. And under the old-fashioned and under the traditional way we've been doing variances, everything has been growing bigger because it always seemed reasonable to be as big as your neighbor. So that is a problem, to me, anyway.
So go ahead, Sue.
Sorry. Sue, I actually agree with Margaret on this. I mean, I don't think that would definitely not be something that would be appropriate and what we would want to see, I don't think, for the town.
Well,
if we were to approach something like that in terms of not.
Julie?
Yes.
Have we
I
lost
am
Julie?
here.
No,
Can you hear me?
Is there anything we can, the quality of, yes, is there anything we can do? Having a lot of trouble with the quality of the transmission. Have you had this problem before?
We have been having this problem intermittently. This is 2 nights ago. The zoning meeting was pretty good. And unfortunately, I don't know, I hate to say if it's the wind outside or the weather connections and the cable lines, I really don't know. But Zoom has been having some strange things happen lately.
Okay.
I was on another Zoom meeting today and it was fine. This one is just a big black box. But anyway.
So Sue, do you want to go ahead and finish? We'll catch what we can.
I think I finished. I was just really agreeing with Margaret and what she had to say about not encouraging changing some of the smaller places that we have that are already in existence and turning them all into large McMansions. I watched that happen in Ridgefield.
So I am going to, I have some thoughts that based on what the conversation Doug started, which is, I think we make this harder on ourselves than we need to. And I think we let it go on longer than we need to. And when we do that, we get more and more invested in it. So I think the process of looking first for the hardship is a worthwhile one. And if they can't prove a hardship, then we don't go any further. I think it won't change the outcome, but it might make it, it might make it more palatable to us and perhaps to the owners, because I think we dangle ideas like we did with the barn or the pool house on Chalabi's, and then they try to do it and then we can't take it anyway. So what I would like to do is try to sum this up. I think we promised ourselves a good conversation. I think we had one. I think the strategy of potentially changing the zoning regulations is something that people should look at. And if you have any ideas to bring it back to another meeting, I think nothing is apparent. And we run up against the problem with conflicting with state statute. So, and I would like us to try and change our process to look first at the hard. This is what you're suggesting, Doug, right? To look first at the hardship?
Yes, I think it makes the meeting more efficient because again, instead of getting, wrapped up into, where's the garage, where's the, breezeway, where's the floor plan, let's jump right to the main issue that we're concerned about, which is what's the hardship.
Okay.
I thought that
Then the other thing I think we agreed upon is that the other thing that we agreed upon is that I would talk to Gail and see if anything's going on with the bar in terms of trying to change state statute. The only conversation I ever had with her was right after, and maybe she said it at our meeting, right after the decision came down, where she said exactly what Margaret said, which is, there was a lot of unhappiness with it, and they were going to see if they could, the bar was going to see if they could tackle this in some way. So I will call Gail and ask that question, but beyond that, I think we're just going around in circles, and I don't know. I think we've had the conversation. I think we've looked at everything. I would say for myself, in good conscience, that knowing that we are aware of what I don't know if these other commissions are aware of the Verlo decision or not. And they're choosing to ignore it, or they're not aware of it. We're aware of it. And I think given the fact that we're aware of it, we have to abide by it.
I agree.
Yep,
I
definitely.
agree.
Yeah.
So I am going to talk to Gail. You all are going to look at the zoning regs, and I think and we're going to try to start our conversations with the hardship, and make the conversations or the discussion not to let it go on as long as it has, and just try to be more. Let us try to not try to find a solution for them.
So would that involve any kind of alteration in how we hear a case? If somebody wants to come before the board and request a variance, would we, rather than have them, as we've discussed before, roll out their plans and start showing us, drawings and so on, would we change that our first question is, clearly they have it written down right on their application. So would we just jump right to that? Would give us an explanation of what the
Yes,
hardship
I
is?
think that's what, Doug, that's what you're suggesting, right? We go first to the
Yeah, and
hardship.
I think if we force an applicant to address that first, and I don't know how, I don't know how, if you can do something like a preliminary vote, but if the applicant can't get past that issue, then, you know, what is the sense, what is the purpose of listening to, you know, the drawings and the surveys and the comments of neighbors and all of that type of thing? Why, you know, why go through all of that if they can't preliminarily get over the hurdle of a hardship?
I thought the applications were being reviewed before they came before us. Is that still happening?
Julie, yes. Julie.
I had volunteered to do that, but I don't think we've had an application.
No, we haven't.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
not
done.
had one since you volunteered. Yes, I review it and then I scan it over to Nanette.
It's John Cody. Doug, I think we had this conversation where if an application was going to come in, that I would contact you and we would go over everything. So this is trying to excellent light on the fact we can focus on the hardship at that point. You know, I could bring it to you and we could meet with the applicant and you can tell them the DBA's purpose.
Well, you know, and again, I don't want to discourage anybody from filing an application. You know, we don't want to shut the door. I mean, if somebody still wants to go forward, that's their prerogative. But I think, you know, just to hammer home the point, this is the first and main thing that you have to show the board.
I would add, you know, if it's a predicate issue, I think the person coming before the board has to be aware of that. They have to understand that it's not, wouldn't this be nice, but do you have hardship? And tell us about the hardship.
And I think Steve, what we often come up against is they put something down as a hardship that isn't a hardship. And we totally revised our application form to be much more explicit about what a hardship was. And I don't think it's actually improved the quality of what we're getting in the application since we did that.
I wanted to thank Doug for offering to do that, because I've seen in wetlands around and about the State Wetlands Commissions that sometimes it's really important for the staff and someone from the commission to be communicating with each other. It saves a lot of problems. So I think I thank you for taking on extra work, but we value your expertise.
I would like Julie to sit in on these meetings, because Julie's the first person who talks to them. And my guess is that by the time it comes to this conversation, Doug, with you and with John, that Julie will have already said this to them. So I think to keep the lines of communication open, I think, Julie, if you're willing, I think you should sit in on these meetings.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, I remember, Julie, you said you had done a
Unless
lot of
anybody
explaining.
has anything else, I'm going to. I think the last one, Julie, you came in early and spent time with the applicant
I did.
after they thought, yeah. Well, we'll do the best we can, and if people still come in with something that it doesn't represent a hardship, I think we have to just bite the bullet and turn it down and keep and move ahead. And I know this doesn't make everybody happy, but I think this is the reality of what we're dealing with. This is the reality in front of us. So okay to close the discussion, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Karen?
Yeah, yes, okay to close the discussion. I personally, I'm just really hoping that something is going on, with the bar, that, that doesn't render us, so, as a board, so hands tied. I in a way, maybe I'm overly sensitive, but I just feel like, oh, well, it's kind of like, as a little addendum to in favor of the small houses, I just feel like this hard line approach is kind of, is the demise of the non-conforming houses, which is, the bulk of our old housing stock in Roxbury. They need to be updated at some point, not just like supersized, but just, updated, modernized, improved, and still keep their old character. So anyway, you guys all know that. That's a personal note.
Okay. Anybody else before we close the discussion? I'm sorry, I have a fly here.
My lamp is falling.
Me and Vice President Pence. Nancy, Margaret,
Well, no, I think there's sometimes I just think that if there's
okay,
no wiggle
Go ahead.
room, if there's no wiggle room, it makes it just more difficult to negotiate anything. And sometimes it does make sense for a non-conforming structure to be changed for the specific reasons that may be given, although they might not be a hardship. It's a very difficult position to be in. And I think we all struggle with it. There's definitely pros and cons, but you just sort of also want to be able to help the people in the community in whatever small way you can.
Well, yes, but I think that this is what we have to deal with. And
Right.
so, we can feel bad about it, but I feel like we've hashed it through pretty well. Nothing. I think this is what ZBAs are doing or should be doing at this point. And yes, our hands are tied, but
If I could just
this is
say, having discretion can
the
be
state of the.
I was going to say that having discretion can be very difficult personally also. And the old ZBA, I remember back when I was a reporter and even applying to the ZBA, they were constantly being criticized for not having an even playing field, for, granting one kind of variance to one person, but almost the exactly same thing not granting it. And so you're under a lot more personal pressure, I think, when the rules aren't clear. Those were the old days.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I will report back at the next meeting about any discussions with Gail, and if anybody has further thoughts about the zoning regs, then please ask to have it put on the agenda. We move now to other business, and John Cody, our zoning enforcement officer, has asked for some time to address the board. So John, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to start off by thanking you for granting me this time to clarify a couple things. I'll start off with a topic that I wasn't going to bring up, but did because of the conversation you just had. That last applicant was fully aware of hardship and what it was. I told him all about it. I didn't think he had one. His only avenue, you all know what it was, and it was up to him to bring that to you, which they chose. But that was just a sidebar of what the conversation with him was. But the real reason why I wanted to discuss this is because after listening to the last recording, which they all are, I was rather discouraged with some of the words that were said about me. There are people who said that I was encouraging that applicant. There are people who said that I gave an opinion to that applicant. There was someone who said that I would, something about putting a bell on a cat, and I should not be talking to these people, telling them that they will get approved and such, when I would never do such a thing. I have never given an opinion to someone that they will be approved, because that's not my call. That is not my ring. I'm not in that. I just would hopefully encourage the commission to keep my name out of the mouth saying things that I never did. That is not my style. That is not my technique. The other thing that really was upsetting was later on in the recording, it was stated that John Cody doesn't seem to know what he's doing, or he hasn't been exposed to enough ZBA stuff. To work on that, I would just like to clarify that I was on both the wetlands and zoning commissions for numerous years. When this job became available, I went to the Central Connecticut State University, took 2 semesters of classes to get Casio certified. I was taught by Gail McTaggart, every attorney, Ziska, blah, 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 all the way down the road. Each class had an extensive exam after that. After taking the classes, I had to take a 4-hour final exam, which I passed, thank God. Concluding after that, there was a case study that I had to do. I did a 50-page case study, passed that. So I certainly do know my way around zoning and wetlands, and to have someone on a commission state something like that doesn't reflect well, especially when it's recorded for everyone to hear. I just really didn't appreciate that. And just want to say that, get that out in the air, and hopefully it'll all cease and desist. Pretty much sums up my feelings on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments?
Well, I
So-
would like to say thank you, John, for coming forward and discussing
I
that.
appreciate you being here. And since you're here, what? Nancy, were you trying to
What?
say something?
I thought I said something.
Well, say it again, because we didn't hear you.
I don't know. Did people hear me?
No.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I care.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you have the bad connection, Nanette.
Well, would you mind
I
saying
won't-
it again?
If I can remember. What I said was that I thank John for coming to our commission and getting that out in the open and letting us know how he felt.
Yes, thank you, John.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, John, I think maybe offline, you and I can have a conversation about, I think one of the things that has, and maybe it engendered some of the comments that have been difficult for the commission is we've received emails, and I'm happy to show them to you.
Oh, gladly.
We've received emails that you had sent to an applicant that we felt put us in a difficult position after.
Excuse me, Nanette, I have those right here if you like.
No, I have them here too,
I
John.
can read it.
I have them too. I was trying to avoid having the conversation here,
Right
but
here, it does say I
if you
agree.
want to have it
with
here, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, share them, please. Publicly. I mean, if anyone wants those emails or my dialogues to Brent and Nanette, you were copied, I'll be more than happy to send them out.
I'm speaking of one that was related to the Botsford Hill property.
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
Okay. So the email says, even though you are not capitalized, expanding the footprint, the interior is being enlarged. Personally, I have zero concern.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with you that this is a perfect solution to your problem. then you say you have cause for alarm because you're not sure that you would
Yeah, sure. I
allowed
have
to
no problem
defend
with that.
for the ZBA. Wait, let me finish. And then you say, I am hopeful that the ZBA will permit you to do this project. Since there is absolutely no impact on the footprint of the site, it is certainly within their prerogative to approve. It was not within our prerogative to approve. And when, I just would like you to.
But you did approve it.
We did not, well, no, we approved it because we did a swap. We didn't approve it on the merits of the change. We did it because they swapped out a much larger variance. So I just want you to think about the position it puts us in when the zoning enforcement officer appears to have, regardless of what your intent was, appears to have told an applicant that they believe that this is something we can approve. It just puts us in a very difficult position.
Do you want me to play the recording of the last minutes where words were said? I have it right here ready to go if you like. It's not quite the same as that. It's a little bit more direct. Here, listen.
But it's not helping us when John Cody tells applicants, this looks like a good idea. And of course it looks like a good idea. We think it's fine.
That is
We
not,
look at it.
that's not, where do those words come from, Margaret?
That
I never
was-
said those
That
words.
was, you've set the application up, and it's the second time you've set up an application with a note that the applicant draws to our attention that you think it's a good idea or that you approve it. And earlier in the meeting,
Margaret, excuse me, I would never tell the applicant it can be approved because I am not the ZBA.
I didn't say
I told
approve.
I told that last applicant
Okay.
that his only chance, it was a snowball.
Say that, Margaret.
It's recorded, it's all recorded. But anyway, we can get over this and let it go, or we can just continue, because I've got plenty of scenarios like that. So, yeah, step off, whatever, all this stuff's all there. So we can just move on and keep each other's names out of each other's mouths and act professional, if that's okay with you guys.
I apologize you heard that on a recording, and I think you're somewhat misinterpreting it, but it was critical. And I'm sorry, I'm not in and out of town hall as much as usual, so I probably would have said something to you personally. I'm sorry that you heard it that way.
Well, it's on YouTube. It's been heard by 25, 26 people now, forever. Every meeting is recorded. We all know that.
And some of them, yes, we are aware.
Yes, I know. But again, I just wanted to make my point. I think I did, so I'm fine. Willing to move on.
Okay. Any other business to be brought before the ZBA? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Doug moves and Sue seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Steve, welcome again.
Thank you. Good to meet you all. Glad I could see
No
everybody.
more excitement this year.
Yeah, seriously. And better reception next time.
Yeah, I hope so.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.